In this tutorial, we're going to talk about the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool. I'm currently on the selection tool, which is this black arrow tool that I get to by hitting V on my keyboard. And to get to my direct selection tool, I hit the letter A. Now, let me go ahead and take the rectangle tool and draw a random rectangle on the artboard. Let me deselect and hit V to go to the selection tool, and then select the rectangle on my artboard, like so. Now what you see is, obviously the rectangle is selected, and you can tell by these empty squares around the selection that this is selected by the selection tool and not the direct selection tool. If I make a selection with the direct selection tool, you won't see the empty squares or the white squares around the selection. You only see these, we call them vector points. We'll discuss this in detail later. Going back to having my object selected with the selection tool. Now, the things I can do to my object while it's selected with the selection tool are limited. I can maybe, if I hover over the stop point, I can increase it in height, like so. I can narrow the width and stuff like that. If I hover over the edge, one of the angles, you will see this curved double arrow shape, which means I'm about to be able to rotate this element. So if I click and rotate, that's what will happen. So this is pretty much what I can do while having my element or my object selected with the selection tool. Now, another very important thing that I'm allowed to do while my object is selected with the selection tool is if I hit enter, I will get this dialog box. And what this box is telling me is basically it's asking me whether I want to move this object or not. So it says move, and then it gives me the possibility of specifying the position, the horizontal and vertical positions in which I would like this element to move. So let's say, for example, let me enter a value here like 1 inch, which means I would like this rectangle to move 1 inch to the right, and then let's say I would like it to move also 1 inch down. So this is what I would put for the horizontal and vertical values, and then I can say OK, and that's exactly what happened. So my rectangle moves one inch to the left, to the right, excuse me, and then 1 inch down. If I want the opposite, obviously, I can hit enter again and change the values to negative numbers from here. In case I would like to copy this rectangle, then I hit the copy button. So let me show you another example. My other example is the following. I'm going to select the rectangle tool from the toolbox, and then I want to click once on the artboard. A dialog box will open, and it's basically asking me the width and the height that I want to specify for my rectangle. So I'm going to say 1 inch by 1 inch, and then hit OK. So I will end up having a 1 by 1 inch square. That's what I wanted. So let me put this object at the top left of my artboard. Now, since we're learning how to use the selection and the direct selection tools, let me go ahead and hit enter while I have my square selected with the selection tool. And then what I want to do is make a sort of a pattern of this square on the artboard. So I want to duplicate it. What I need to specify in horizontal is 1 inch. If I do that, it's going to move 1 inch to the right. And then in vertical, I can say 1 inch as well. So my object is going to go down 1 inch. Now, since I want it duplicated, I'm going to hit copy. Okay, so this is how I duplicate my square. Now if I want to continue duplicating, as we mentioned several times in previous tutorials, I just hit the Command D, D for Daniel button. So Command D is what I'm doing right now. Okay. Now let's say I want to continue this pattern along the whole artboard. What I can do is select everything and either move them manually by holding the Alt key. You know, we also mentioned that if you hold the Alt key, select your objects and then drag, you can duplicate them. Or you can just, again, having everything selected, hit Enter, which again takes you to the Move panel, which appears provided you are on the Selection tool and have your elements selected. So how far do I want to move all of this? That's the question now. If this top square is 1 inch wide and I want to leave an empty space next to it, so that's another inch, then I have to move the whole thing 2 inches, right? So let me go ahead and do that. 2 inches to the right. That's why I would say 2 inches horizontal. And then I won't specify anything vertically because I don't want my, this domino pattern to move vertically. So I'm going to say 0 for that. And then hit copy. Now the way I move between one tab and the next is just by clicking the tab key on my keyboard. So hit OK. And that's how I get, the domino effect. I mean the chess effect, if you will. It doesn't matter, but you get the point. And then continue clicking Command D and so forth. So this is how you end up with a nice pattern. Let me close all of this and talk now about the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool. Now we specified that the selection tool has limited capabilities. What if I draw the same rectangle and then use the direct selection tool now? What the direct selection tool does is it allows me to make different changes in addition to what the selection tool allows me to do. So if you remember, having my object selected with the selection tool, I can make it longer, wider, and so forth, perhaps rotated when I hover over the edge. But having it selected with the direct selection tool will allow me to really change the complete shape of my object. So maybe I want to, for example, hold on this last vector point on the bottom right and then drag it out. Oops, sorry. Drag it out to create a shape. It looks like a kite for me. Now what I did is I didn't just click on this vector point and drag it out, because if you notice, if the 4 vector points are in blue, then it means that my entire object is selected. What I need to do is select one of the vector points. This being a rectangular shape is made up of 4 vector points. And if I want to touch this bottom right one, I need to select it individually. So the way to do that is to deselect the object by clicking outside if you want, and then click outside and drag, just like I'm doing now, only to select that last vector point at the bottom right. Once it's selected, you will notice that it is a blue vector point while the others are white, which means that I can now work with it. So if I wish to drag it out, I'm able to. Now, if the others being white doesn't mean that I can't do anything with them. Let me, for example, go ahead and touch the top left one and, drag it down, create shapes. You have to play around with these to get a feel of how powerful the direct selection tool is. But just remember that if you click in the center of the object and you see all vector points highlighted in blue, it means that you cannot do something specific to one of the vector points. In order to be able to do something specific to one of the vector points or to several, you just need to make sure that you click on the edge of your shape, like for example on the straight line or on the vector point itself. So let me go ahead and click on this straight line, which I mean the diagonal, if you will, just like that, and you will see that all of my vector points, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, are white, which means I can do something with them. However, if I click in the center of my object, my vector points are blue, and therefore I cannot manipulate the way they look. So this is really powerful and very useful in many things, whether it is creating shapes, changing shapes. Sometimes we have text that belongs in a text, and we want in a text box, I mean, and we want to give it a certain shape. For example, fit text within a certain rhombus or parallelogram or anything. We just click on the vector point and then move it. Okay, so just remember that in order to be able to use and move these vector points, you have to either click on the edge of the element just like this, or on the vector point itself, and then change that.